Hello, all you amazing women, and welcome to How to Feel Like a Midlife Goddess. With me, Amanda Ryder, nutritionist and author. Now, I call this podcast How to Feel Like a Midlife Goddess because, let's face it, so many of us don't feel like shining in midlife. We can be grappling with physical and psychological symptoms, which can lead to a real loss of confidence, and it can feel like you're really losing your identity. However, I believe it's possible for us all to feel good at this time of our lives. So each week, I'm going to be sharing with you my best nutrition and lifestyle advice, as well as interviewing expert speakers. And week by week, together, we will build upon a foundation of healthy, sustainable habits that will really benefit us and make all the difference to how we feel. So stay tuned, because this is your recipe for thriving at midlife and bringing out your inner goddess. I don't know much about you, Kaki, but I came across you when I was researching Japanese culture before and after my recent trip to Japan, and I've been obsessed with all things Japanese since. I found your newsletters, which are such a joy to read, because you come across as such a wise soul. What we say in the UK is like an old soul, someone that's, is just older than their years. And your writing makes me feel calm, collected, optimistic, and philosophical. And I'm keen to share that with our midlife goddess tribe here. Now, you are incredibly knowledgeable when it comes to diet and nutrition, but you also have some key lifestyle suggestions, and you present them in such a non-judgmental way, which I'm looking forward to hearing more about. And I've recently discovered you're also an illustrator, so that all those lovely drawings on your newsletters are created by you. And I'm sure we will want to join your newsletter and people will want to have a look at it. But these are beautiful drawings of food and people. And again, they're very calm and lovely to look at. And that you've also been featured and published in many US magazines. So this is our chat with Kaki Okumura. And Kaki was basically brought up, no, you were born in Dallas, but brought up in Tokyo and New York. So quite an interesting upbringing. So really keen, if you could tell us a bit about your background and how you came to live between Tokyo and New York, and how you straddle these two very different cultures, Kaki. Hi.
Hi. No, thank you so much for having me on this podcast. Yeah, I got to look into your work a little bit, and I feel like we share a lot of similar philosophies. So I'm really excited to be here. A bit about my background. So yes, I was born in the US, born in Dallas, Texas, actually, and then I spent a bit of time in New York after that. But I moved back to the US in middle school and high school. So I got to spend some time growing up there. And then I
So
went
middle
back
school is from what, 11 or?
exactly maybe 12.
Oh, okay, that kind of
Yeah.
age, yeah.
It was very much like, still kind of formative years. I still do have a lot of memories from the US. And when I graduated, so I went to high school in Japan, but then when I graduated, I came back to the US for college. I think that was the time where I really had like this experience of where I was really comparing the two cultures. I feel like, when I first moved back to Japan, I was a bit too young to really like think about, similarities and differences. But, being older and going back to the US, I really paid attention to like, oh wow, people's attitudes towards food, towards health, towards exercise. And the message that I was getting was so different. I grew up like overweight. I struggled a lot with my health as a child, and then also just like into my teenage years. When I moved to Japan, it took place over several years, but I had like a much better understanding of like, what a balanced, healthy lifestyle could look like. And coming back to the US and really seeing that message wasn't as prevalent really inspired me to do a lot more writing about it. I wasn't really, actually did not study like writing or anything in college as an econ major. Like there's a strong part of me that really wanted to share and explore this part of like Japanese culture and things around health and diet and our well-being in general. So I was doing a lot of writing online. I think a lot of people resonated with it, or they were really inspired by this different kind of attitude. So I think I had like one or two like more viral pieces of writing. And from then on, I really like started to invest a bit more, learning about like the space and also, trying to share with other people.
Yeah, because I understand you've got a really big following, haven't you, for your newsletter? Do you want to share with us sort of how many people subscribe to your newsletter?
It's actually not that big. My biggest platform would be on Medium. I
Okay.
think I have around like 80 something thousand there, but
Okay,
then
wow.
itself is a bit smaller. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's pretty impressive. I just kind of, yeah, want to understand. So you were born in the US and you went back to Japan. Your
Yes.
both your parents Japanese.
Yes.
Yeah.
Born and raised in Japan.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so
Yeah.
they were yeah, they went to the US. You were born there. And how old are you when you went back?
To Japan or to the
Yeah.
US?
To Japan.
So I was, yeah, I think I was
Or
around
back or to,
12.
yeah, depends where you
Yeah.
think of as home.
I think I was around like 12 when I went back to Japan from the US.
Wow, so
Yeah.
your first 12 years were in the US.
Yes.
They're quite
Yeah.
formative years, yeah, yeah. And you said you were overweight. When were you overweight?
I think when I moved from Texas to New York, but it might have started in Texas, but I think the move like made it a lot more worse for me. I definitely stress ate as a kid. I think like it was a big source of comfort for me. And then I kind of carried that habit growing up. So basically, since I was a small kid and then throughout middle school, I'd say. Yeah.
Yeah, because I kind of imagine your Japanese parents would have been, I mean, this is my, kind of perspective on the Japanese, but I was only there for 2 weeks. We did travel around a lot, and I obviously paid a lot of attention to lifestyle because it's something I'm really interested in and diet. But everyone there just seems so focused on well-being
Mm.
and what they eat, and from small children to the elderly, it's never I'm too busy to not prepare proper food. I mean, just that kind of philosophy doesn't exist in Japan, and it's very much weaved into the lifestyle that you're going to be healthy and you're going to do things that are going to help you achieve that. So I should imagine your parents in Japan would have carried that across with them.
Well, I think so. I think you're correct in saying that it's weaved into lifestyle in Japan. I think it's easier to be healthy in Japan than it is in the US because, first of all, where you live, you're probably doing a lot of walking. So, exercise is kind of a bit more of a natural habit. You're not driving to the gym to have to get a workout in. You can walk to work, you can walk to school. I think also in terms of food, like healthy food is a lot more accessible. It's also provided in more moderate portions. I think, you go out to eat in the restaurant in the US and you get like this huge entree, and it's hard to tell a child, like, you don't need to eat that much if the child doesn't have that sort of sense of moderation. And for me, growing up, and I would just see these huge portions and, be like, okay, this is a normal like portion. But if you grow up in Japan, you're just served less. They're like, okay, I'm just gonna finish what's on my plate. I do have siblings that they didn't struggle with weight in the same way I had. So I don't like it's not necessarily like my parents like maybe didn't instill these things. There was a part of like I struggle with the way I think I had a way of coping that relied on food that, you know, just led to that. So yeah, definitely like multiple factors, I think.
Yeah, I think environment is has such an impact on how you eat, the environment at home and outside of the home. And that's probably why, the US and the UK have these high obesity rates because it's so easy and cheap to get fast food, ultra processed food, whereas sort of starting from scratch is a different kind of mindset, isn't it? And I think they've sort of done studies to show that you are 70% influenced by the people around you. So if they're all eating, fast food, then, you might better resist it for a while, but eventually, you're going to give into it as well. But yeah, so if it's there, yeah, so it's so interesting. But your parents were cooking like tofu and fish and rice and pickled vegetables and all the sort of things you see on a Japanese plate.
Yeah, I definitely grew up with like Japanese food. I think I also grew up with like an American diet. And so, in Japan, it's like more about moderation, eating like portions that make you feel full, but you're not like overstuffed, or enough to feel satisfied. And I think I just had like a difficult time practicing that.
Yeah, they what is it? Ariachibu?
Oh
Eat
yeah, I
until
had to.
you're 80% full.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every time I went, and my first weight loss experience, so, when I was overweight, like I would lose weight, gain weight, and it was kind of like fluctuating for a while. And I can talk a bit more about like what I did to stabilize that. But my first weight loss experience was when I went back to Japan for a summer, and like I was still a kid, and dieting wasn't like a huge thing for me. Like I kind of knew a bit about like, oh, I need to eat less, or I need to eat healthier, but like I wasn't super like infatuated with the idea. But my first experience was like going from the US to Japan just for a summer vacation. We had like a few months. I was just living with my grandmother, and she would feed me whatever she would eat, and we would just walk around everywhere, like explore Tokyo because that's where she lived. I came back and realized that I lost weight. I wasn't even thinking about it. I wasn't, and in my head, I was actually eating like better foods in Japan. I was like, oh, all these Japanese snacks are available to me, all like my favorite Japanese like foods. And to me, that was like a really like almost shocking experience. And I remember trying to talk about it with my mom. I was like, oh, like, can we do like the same thing here? But I think eventually, like old habits kind of come back based on the environment. It's like, okay, I'm like hanging out with friends, and we're like eating like, these ginormous portions, or not like super healthy. And I could not like like Tokyo's a very safe city, at least where I lived. And so I could walk around just with me and my siblings. But, in the US, if I wanted to go somewhere, I needed a car. And obviously, as a kid, I needed my mom to drive me. You're just like really restricted in what you can do. And I think, yeah, it was, I think there's a lot going on in the US that like makes it harder to be healthy. And so a message that I try to reinforce when I do talk about health and talking to people who are maybe struggling with their health is that when it comes to like, especially being overweight, there's a lot of like, this is your fault. Like, you should have, like, why don't you have the willpower? But I think it's healthier to recognize that there are a lot of things outside of your control that have, you know, not been conducive to your health. That doesn't mean there's nothing you can do. I think it's important to still be responsible. But a thing that I like to say a lot is like, your problems are not necessarily your fault, but they're still your responsibility. And so when you take that pressure off of like, oh, this is like my fault, I'm like, I don't have the willpower, or like, oh, if only I could just do whatever. Some people have other advantages, and a lot of that comes to environment. And, just because it's, you may not have those similar advantages doesn't mean you can't do anything. But, thinking about like, okay, what kind of environment can I shape for myself so I can nudge healthier habits, make it easier for myself. I feel like that's a really big part of like the process of trying to better your own well-being.
Yeah, that sounds like really sensible advice because there is a lot of shame with weight gain,
Oh
being
yeah.
overweight, and yeah, it's very easy. I always, when I'm giving talks or I also run courses, weight loss courses for women. But yeah, I mean, blaming yourself is just, you end up then feeling quite worthless. And then you think, well, what's the point? I'll just keep on eating. But actually, if you want to be slim and fit, and it's not even about being super slim, it's just being a healthy weight for you, isn't
Yeah.
it? You have to buck the trend. If you live in the UK or the US, you have to be different to the majority of people. And you
Right.
have to sort of sidestep the fast foods and the quick foods and, just not prioritizing food altogether. So, yeah, I think that's a really good message to, yeah, not, blame people and shame people because they're overweight. It's just incredibly easy to suddenly, find that you've gone up a size or two when you're living in this country. Anyway, Kaki, tell us, you know, some of the useful habits that you've employed in your kind of quest to be healthier that obviously you've taken from the Japanese culture, I think, from reading your newsletters, and and how you managed to obviously you're in New York now, right?
Right.
Yeah, and how you managed to stay healthy living in the US and maintain these sort of Japanese principles.
Yeah, I would say the big principle, and this is what I suggest like any beginner, if you've like, whether you're really interested in health or like have no clue what you're doing, the easiest like state change people can make in the beginning is around moderation. And so like you don't even need to change what you eat, how you eat, just focus first on like trying to eat like in moderate portions. I find that people who struggle with their health tend to be overeating. And the like asterisk, I guess I'll add to that is it's really easy to overeat if you're not eating like healthy, not healthy, but like fiber rich, like whole nutrient dense foods. So a lot of people, especially if they're relying on more processed foods that don't have a lot of fiber that, signal satiation, you end up overeating, but you don't feel like you are because volume wise, it doesn't seem that much. But if you, are eating like nutrient whole foods, like you will feel full. Like there's no way you can like, eat celery sticks and like hit like a crazy calorie count because you're just gonna feel full. And I'm not saying you should do that,
We
but
say you always have a second stomach for like a pudding or some chocolate, which is it's kind of true, isn't
no, that is kind of true. But I think like you don't need like a whole pint of ice cream, let's say, like to satiate that feeling of like, oh, I want something sweet. Like you can definitely have like a small bowl of ice cream. Um, and that isn't, and when I say moderation, I think a lot of people sometimes misunderstand that as like restriction, like, oh, I need to restrict myself, eat less. But the difference to me is really when you're eating in moderation, you still feel full, you feel satisfied, you feel satiated. I think part of that is like being mindful of how you feel. I think, if you're sitting on the couch eating like ice cream out of the pint itself, like it's going to be easy to overeat because you're not really being mindful. But if you sit down at a table, it's maybe beautifully plated, maybe you're having with a friend, making a special occasion, like you're gonna find you don't need to eat that much to feel like satisfied. You can be like, okay, I had a little bit, like, that was really nice. And then it'll be so much easier to put it away. And I find that when people practice moderation, mindful eating, you're eating less, but you're not feeling restricted. And if you let yourself eat the foods that you want, so not being like, oh, ice cream's bad, I'm never going to eat that, or like chocolate's bad, like you can like put it away. If you are like, oh, I want cake, but that'd be bad, so I'm not going to have it, you're going to think about it for the rest of the evening, into the morning, into the next day, and then like have this moment of like, some people might describe it as like breaking or like giving in, but they'll just like end up eating way more than they needed to like feel that sense of like satisfaction. But if you kind of let yourself, enjoy it as like you want it and being mindful of like, okay, I want something sweet. Let me like have something, just satisfy that. And then I could think about something else. That moderation bit and, coupling that with mindful eating and then also just um, whole foods, I feel like is really a big part of like what I still do in New York is that, I go out to eat, but I'm not thinking like, like, oh, I'm being bad because I'm having this like, fried chicken or whatever. It's like, okay, like this is a special occasion. I'm here with my friend. I'm gonna enjoy it. And once I have it, I can like move on from that thought. I'm not thinking about like, oh, I wish I could have eaten XYZ. In terms of like other things that I do, I think living in New York is really easy to like walk, but I think trying to apply that to people who maybe not live in super walkable cities is, just being mindful of trying to put in like movement every day and not like discounting, you don't need to like sweat and be out of breath and totally exhausted for like movement to be healthy for your body. I do think like, if you love the gym, like you should definitely do it. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you, maybe go to a gym and it's something like you dread, you're like, oh, I hate being on the treadmill or I hate lifting weights. Like there's so many other ways you can move your body. You can go to a yoga class, you can go to like a cycling class. You can just go for a walk, make it a thing to go on walks. Maybe if you're more outdoorsy, you can go for bike rides, hiking. I think this idea of like trying to integrate movement that you enjoy, which is something you'll be consistent in. If you hate it, you're going to give it up. It's just no
Yeah.
need to do it
So,
any
so what
different
do you
way.
do? What movement do you practice?
I think in terms of like what's integrated in my lifestyle, walking is a big one, but
Yeah.
I also love hiking. So I'll take the train up, go on hikes. I also am just big on like stretching and like being like flexible and mobile. So I'll do like some strength training coupled with like some stretching exercises at the end. I also like get tired and bored of things easily. So there's a time in my life where I was like a huge runner. Like I would run in Central Park or on the Hudson River. But yeah, these days I don't do that at all.
Uh-huh.
So it's really about just do what I enjoy in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good message as well, isn't it? And yeah, or we all see somebody else doing something, we think, oh, we want a bit of that. And then you actually do it and you think, actually, I'm not really enjoying this. And I
Yeah.
had one of these moments just recently where I've been rushing around trying to fit everything in and doing a particular sort of practice that I do. And the last few mornings, I've just got up and I've done like 20 minutes of yoga in front of YouTube, in
Yeah.
my lounge, on the big telly. And oh my God, it's made me feel much calmer, even though there's quite a lot going on and some, in midlife, you haven't got there yet, but it's quite easily what easily happens that you have, a to-do list of 10 things and you feel overwhelmed and it's horrible. And right here, right at the moment, and it's probably the same in the US, but we have Black Friday and it's
Mm.
all these emails, you've got to buy this now, and oh, it's
Yeah.
just everyone sort of, it's so stupid. It's like, because every year people think, oh, we're going to be less commercial and Christmas is about being with people, but this pressure builds up and it's just on top of your already busy life, which makes me think you are very calm. How do you cultivate this calmness that you have about you, Kaki?
Um, yeah, I feel like it's interesting when people tell me I'm like I present myself as like a calm, collected person because I feel like sometimes I don't feel that way. But I think what I am like my personality I'm actually don't think is like really drawn to that, but I think I am very mindful of like my mental state. So if I find myself overwhelmed, I'm aware of it and I'm like very conscious of not like pushing those boundaries. I find that, and in the past, like this was when I was younger, I didn't have strong boundaries or awareness of like, my mental state and like burnout. Like, and once you reach that point of burnout, it's so much harder and takes so much more time to recover. And so I've really like thought to myself after that, like, okay, I'm not going to let myself reach that. And so, yeah, first of all, like being mindful of like your current mental state. So if you feel like you're reaching that, like trying to pull back. And some ways in which I do that is really like, I would have like, or I still do like have a writing practice, but not just writing for the public, but writing for myself.
Good, like journaling.
Yeah, journaling.
Yeah.
If I'm like doing well, I find that maybe I don't need it as much, but if I'm really struggling, I try to explore those emotions. It's like, okay, why do you feel stressed or why do you feel this way? Like, and maybe it's like, oh, I feel like I'm not accomplished enough. It's being able to explore those emotions. And yeah, at the end of the day, you end up coming to a message of like, okay, well, yeah, at the end of the day, like what really matters, you'll start thinking about your relationships, love, and I think it helps me have perspective. Whereas if I'm on my phone, like scrolling or reading the news or on social media, it's really hard to like remember that, have that sense of perspective. And yeah, also exercise. Exercise is great for mental health. I think a lot of people do it being like, oh, I'm doing it so I can gain muscle or, be more fit or lose weight. But like, I think we should talk a bit more about the immediate positive effects of exercise. Is like, you don't need to wait, months or weeks to like have experience like the benefits of exercise. It's immediate. Like you go on a walk and you feel immediately refreshed. I think, yeah, that's also a big part of like, taking care of my mental well-being is like physical exercise.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Just going back to what you said about, social media and phones, it's just so easy, isn't it, to pick your phone up in the morning. I mean, I don't have them in the bedroom, but I have lots of people that I work with that do, and it's very common. And people go, they scroll, and then if, they look at the news, and, there's a lot of bad news around at the moment. And then they get up and then they feel a bit down and they haven't even started their day. It's not even 8 o'clock, and I think we're always looking for something out of us and then that sets your mood. You're allowing these things to come around you, but if you actually go inside sometimes and you maybe start your day off with some journaling, or I don't know, some positive affirmations or some yoga or whatever it might be, or going for a walk with your dog, or whatever, it definitely puts you on the front foot in terms of your sort of mental health and your attitude to the day, doesn't it?
Oh yeah. I think what you said about being aware of like kind of your external inputs is super
Yeah.
important because yeah, your mindset is everything. If you like think the world is doom and gloom, it's gonna be that way because it's gonna feel that way. Like what you feel can become your reality. Whereas, if you can think a bit more like, okay, then like what can I do now? Have a more empowered mindset. I think it's a lot easier for people to, just have a more positive outlook and feel a bit more empowered in terms of like, what can I do for myself to better my well-being?
Yeah, and also again, I think for women, I speak for a lot of women when I say this, and I see this and I do it myself, but we are inherent people pleasers and we always
Oh,
want people to like us. And you don't see that in men as much. And it's nobody's fault. It's just, well, maybe it is, but it's kind of maybe it's the patriarchy, but we are people pleasers, and then you put yourself low down on the list in terms of self-care, and then you're just not your best self because you maybe feel a bit resentful, or you're not doing the nice things that make you feel good or help shape your mental health or give you some, a positive start to the day. So I think as women, we really need to hear that actually looking after ourselves can be quite selfless, because we are then better versions of ourselves, and we're better wives and, you know, lovers, parents, whatever it might be. But yeah, it's a really important message, isn't it? That, that we look after ourselves. And I think again, in today's society, which is quite fast moving, I don't know if you agree, but it's seen as quite uncool to meditate or do some of these, journal, or do some of these slower practices that actually are investing in yourself. And, it's seen as much more validated if you get straight on your computer and you start answering, the 30 emails that you face with every morning. Yeah, we still, that is kind of what people look up to. It's like, oh yeah, they're really busy.
yeah.
You realize that ultimately working like that or living like that in the end just makes you feel absolutely lousy. It makes me feel absolutely lousy physically when I allow that kind of living to take over my life.
No, I think what you said about like meditation, it's, you know, mindfulness, there's no like tangible, like you can't really show it, you can't really like measure it in ways like only you can know and feel its effects. And I find that, certain personalities are more geared towards like, I would say traditional meditation where it's like sitting down and structured breathing. But I think the takeaway is really and I find that people who maybe struggle with that maybe benefit a bit more from things like exercise, because exercise in a way is like forced meditation, especially if you're doing something like running, where like your breathing is very paced and then your mind really just like it needs to be a bit more like focused. Like you can like have all your thoughts and then you're not, it's like a nice way to like process what you're feeling. And so, if you're not into like mindful breathing or journaling, I think exercise is also a way. But I think it's important for someone to have a way for them to sit with their thoughts, process them, and, put in that self-care because, like you mentioned, especially women, they're so much more prone to like think about others, think what others think about like, what you can do for other people. Whereas, you know, I like to think about like that message you get on like airplane safety videos. It's like, okay, put on your own mask first before helping others. It's really important to think about like, you know, if you're not like in a place where if you're not like healthy, I would say it's like it's a lot harder to be there for other people. And so there's nothing wrong with like putting yourself first and making sure you're in a place where, you know, you're like healthy, and that's also physically and mentally.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I've also been thinking lately that, as you get older, you, well, not everybody, but you kind of you get more self-aware and you know yourself and you know situations that light you up and situations that kind of make you feel quite oppressed and you can live your life accordingly. But if you never have that quiet time, like you said, with your thoughts and just you yourself, you never really tune into what it is, that the real you wants.
Yeah.
And it's just so easy, isn't it? Because we're just literally bombarded with reels and images and videos and news and all these things that are coming at us at speed that, probably in in our lifetime it's never been. We've never had this much sort of information overload, and it can, it's no wonder that we end up feeling sort of overwhelmed.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's like if you spend time on social media, there's always someone doing something better than you, or like you'll always feel behind. I think
Oh, that's so
yeah.
true. Yeah. Sometimes I don't go on there because I haven't posted anything for a while. And I think, oh no, and everyone else seems to be doing it so brilliantly.
No, I totally. And so yeah, I think it's just part of that practice of having to be mindful of like, okay, like my external surroundings, like what kind of messages am I being surrounded by, and trying to like shape yourself in an environment that's conducive towards like, feeling empowered or feeling better about like what you can do, rather than like, messages that make you feel like, oh, I'm behind. Oh, I'm like not doing this right. Oh, I can't do anything. And, if you're not mindful of like that's happening, it's easier to like go further deep into it. Whereas if you're thinking about like, okay, I saw this ad, let's say, how did this make me feel? Being like just mindful of like how things that surround you impact like the messaging that you feel around yourself. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, so true. That's making me think when we were on the trains and the tube in Japan, especially not so much outside of Tokyo and Kyoto, but in the big cities, the younger generation, wow, they were on their phones. They were
oh
really
yeah.
engrossed on their phones. Yeah, much more so than I think we are here. Even though we are, this was like I felt like it was a kind of another level. So I wonder if Japan is changing in that way. But of course, you've always been right up there when it comes to the latest technology. But that sort of leads me on to, why when you go to somewhere like Japan, it's so culturally different. I mean, it's like, whoa, it's like really smacks you in the face. It's so different, which makes it so much more fun to go and visit. But why do you think Japanese, obviously this podcast is about women, but women people, why are they so focused to, and motivated to eat and live well? Where do you think that comes from?
I think there are multiple things. I would say the big influence that comes to mind is probably your peers and like your parents. I think if your mom and your grandmother live really healthfully, like you're just more motivated to do that. You're like, oh, my grandma, she's like 85, but she like still takes the stairs and does her own grocery shopping, cleans her own house. Like I want to be able to do that when I'm 85. So you kind of just have these like inspirations or like examples of like, okay, like I can achieve that, I can do that. I think, if your friends also care about, like, oh, I want to eat more like, and I think people are raised this way, but thinking about like seasonal foods and like eating with the seasons, I think thinking about like quality of food in that way, um, you're just a bit more like, okay, like I want to be able to live a lifestyle like that. So I think your influences around you, it's a huge part of it. Yeah. In other ways, I would say like Japanese culture in general is really in tune with nature. That comes from like a Shintoist cultural like background in terms of like Japanese culture and also Buddhist beliefs, but they associate like messages from nature and then wanting to be in touch with it. So I think, when you're talking about eating, people are thinking about like seasonal eating, or they really think about like, okay, if I have food, how does this nourish me? Like, I think that kind of like And it's subtle. People aren't really thinking about that all the time, but I do think Japanese people tend to be a bit more foodies than you might find with the average American or maybe Western, just in terms of like they're really thinking about not just how things taste, but really like the quality of freshness. And yeah, I think having those high standards when it comes to like eating also helps.
But where do you think that ultimately, originated from? Do you think
Like,
because most cultures that have money and have their GDP's increased and as most countries get richer, they get fatter. But I think the obesity rate in Japan is, I don't know, something like 4.56%, and in the US
yeah,
it's 40 something percent. So they can afford to, eat the steak and eat out, more frequently and all the things that, and have access to any food they fancy. But they still, they eat really well still. And there isn't this tendency towards fast food. And I think I saw in one of your newsletters, you were talking about portions of McDonald's and various fast foods. And like, the portions in Japan are so much smaller than they
yeah.
are in the US.
Yeah, it's definitely kind of like a joke anytime, someone visits Japan, but they're like, oh my God, like everything's so small. And I just went to movies last night, but my dad got like a regular size Coke and it was literally like the largest cup I've ever seen.
Like a bucket.
Yeah, it was literally a bucket. And it's just so funny to me that we label things like small, let's say, but our understanding of what small looks like is so different. And I think, yeah, moderation is a huge way for people to just live healthier. I don't think Japanese people are like, they eat fast food. We eat like, quote, unhealthy food, but I think
I've just put
because
them on such a pedestal now, but
no,
yeah.
no, no. I think people just eat it in moderation. Like you go out for desserts and it's not like a huge like cup of ice cream. It's like, okay, like I can finish this comfortably and that's what feels appropriate. And
And you
so,
do feel lighter in yourself, don't you? When you've completely overeaten, which, we've all been known to do, but you completely overeat and you have that stuffed, bloated feeling, it's not pleasant. Whereas if
yeah.
you had, like you talked about the small bowl of ice cream or whatever it might be, or a small brownie, you kind of had that hit of pleasure, maybe, and a bit of sugar, but it's just a small amount, and you get joy from it, but you don't have that horrible feeling afterwards. But of course, with those foods that combine salt, fat, sugar, it's very easy, isn't it, to overconsume. It sort of
Yeah.
overrides all your satiety kind of messaging.
No, for sure. I think that's why going back to a point of like eating whole nutrient dense foods, it's still important. You can't just like eat a little bit of ice cream and feel satisfied. But if have an apple beforehand and then you're like, oh, I still have a sweet tooth, like you're gonna eat a little bit of ice cream, you're gonna feel like fine about it. Whereas if you like aren't also eating nutrient dense foods, you're gonna feel like you're depriving yourself. But yeah, I was kind of as we were talking, thinking about, what you said about like, you know, I feel like Japan's a bit of an outlier in that it's a, high income developed nation, but the obesity rates don't reflect that of other cultures who have reached like similar levels of wealth. And yeah, I think like this idea of doing everything in moderation and being in the US, like I'm not entirely sure of like other Western nations, but the US in particular is very like a go big or go home sort of country. Like you want everything to be big and grand and you want to do it to extremist possible like extent. Like that's almost better. But I feel like Japan doesn't share those similar values. So it's like bigger is not always better. And I think this idea of like doing everything in moderation and, you know, this idea around balance being the optimal way to live is a lot stronger than what I see in the US, where it's like, oh, you want to like, more flashy, more big.
No, your philosophy on healthy eating, and I really enjoyed your one of your recent newsletters. It was called, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing this correctly, but Ichisu Sansai,
Oh,
which is
yeah.
one soup and three sides, which is is what I saw a lot when I was in Japan. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah.
We're going to put
So
that together ourselves.
Ichiji Sansai, it directly translates to one soup, three sides. But the idea is like when you have a meal, the most complete and balanced form of meal will have like one soup, which in tends to be miso soup in Japanese culture, but it'd be like a miso soup, rice, and then three side dishes. So one protein and then two vegetable side dishes. And so it doesn't really matter exactly what those dishes are. I think traditional Japanese meals tend to be like a fish main and then like two vegetable side dishes. But the idea is you want balance. So you have your carb, you have your protein, you have your vegetables for like fiber, and then you have a soup that warms you up, promotes digestion. But the idea is you don't do one of too many. It's not like a big plate of steak or a big bowl of pasta. Like you need everything to live well, but having that balance in one meal helps, yeah, make moderation a bit more natural for you. So you're not really having to think about too much if everything's in like a single serving, like small plate. It's like, okay, my like single serving bowl of rice, like this is the carbohydrates I need. And this, fillet of fish is just what I need. And not having to like practice too much of like, okay, I'm gonna stop eating when I'm too full. It's like, okay, like everything's single serving already and balanced for me.
Yeah, no, it's it's a really good way of eating and it does fill you up. And one thing I've taken away since my trip to Japan is having miso soup with my
Yeah.
lunch. Now, I tend to drink it at the end. I don't know if Japanese drink it at the beginning or just with the food, but I find it, it just stretches my stomach or something because I feel much more satiated. And somehow my brain gets the message a bit quicker that I'm full rather than snuffling around for something after I've had, a meal. And I suppose also it's in bowls, you eat with chopsticks, it slows you down. I've also, not with all my meals, but certainly some of my meals, I do use chopsticks now, and it definitely slows you down, which is a good thing. I think, again, we're all trying to do everything so fast, and eating can be part of that, can't it? Sort of, eating your lunch whilst you're reading emails, obviously not a good thing. But how can we put together that kind of meal quite easily? Because it sounds like, oh my God, you've got fish, then you've got two types of vegetables, you've got your rice, so you're boiling your rice up in another in
Yeah.
another pan. It just sounds like a lot of washing up. So, can you talk us through how we can easily sort of put these, this kind of meal together?
Yeah. And of course, it does sound like a lot of work, but I think ways in which you can make it easier for yourself is it's more about the mindset of like having different foods in one meal. So, let's say you're having pasta and it's just you might just start with pasta and tomato sauce, but thinking about like, okay, how do I add protein to this? How do I add more vegetables? And then you might add some shrimp, you might add some frozen spinach is like a really easy way for people to just add vegetables to something. You don't really need to prep it and add it to your pasta sauce. But this idea of like, okay, I want to balance it out with different kinds of foods, thinking, you don't necessarily need the small plates. It doesn't necessarily need to be like a miso soup, but thinking about like, okay, do I have a protein? Do I have a carb? Do I have vegetables? And in general, we probably eat maybe overemphasize the amount of carbs we need. So thinking about more around, okay, really the biggest portion should be vegetables. And so you don't necessarily need to prepare different dishes, but just combining those into one dish can also be a good way. Other thing I like to do is I just make everything in bigger portions than I need. So if I'm making lunch, let's say, I'm not making everything from scratch, or I'll make like a big portion of like salmon and then just save it for dinner so I can reheat it and have it then. Or, if I'm making like some like sauteed spinach, I will just make a lot more of it than I need and then just put it away in Tupperware. So when I do need it, I could just like use it as a topping or use it as a side dish for whatever meal I'm having later that day.
Yeah, such good advice. It's really hard to cook from scratch 3 meals a day or two
Oh,
meals
it's
a day.
impossible.
Yeah. I mean, if you're working, it's like, yeah. And if you're not working, that's your whole day just doing that, sort of, yeah, hunting, gathering it, and then, yeah, putting it in the fridge, washing it, cooking it. Yeah. So we all want those kind of easy fixes. So I've been using an instant soup, actually, an instant miso soup from
Oh,
a lovely brand called Clear Spring, and it's all organic. And yeah, that's just so lovely and has a
yeah.
little bit of tofu in it. But I also saw one of your newsletters, you talked about how to put a lovely soup together. And it really
Oh,
inspired me. And I didn't have time, I think it was a couple of days ago, but I just put the miso soup in a pan and then I added some tofu and some vegetables and
yeah.
a little bit of miso. And it was, so easy, but so tasty. But yeah, what kind of soups do you like to put together?
Yeah, miso soup is definitely a favorite for me. And something else that I like to do is especially with soups, I like to and you can do this with any pressure cooker, but I use my rice cooker. I'll just throw in a bunch of ingredients and then hit start and then just let it cook and let it just sit there. And I think it's just a really nice way of like, okay, just chop up a bunch of like cabbage and mushrooms, put in some like broth, and then let it like sit in the rice cooker, and then I'll have soup. Recently, like I would add like dumplings to it to like make it a bit fuller a meal. But the bigger takeaway there is, I think people think about healthy cooking and think it's a lot of work, whereas I they don't need to be mutually exclusive. You don't need to like cook from fresh vegetables every time to have like the healthiest. Like you can, rely on frozen, you can rely on like pre-cut if that makes your life easier. I think also relying on gadgets is a really nice way. Like I use my rice cooker to make rice. I don't, do it over the pot. I'm not standing over it. If you have an instant pot as well, like
Yeah,
you
I
can,
have an instant pot. It's a lifesaver. Like you said,
yeah,
press a button and then you just go about your life and then you come back and it's done and you haven't had to fuss over it. Yeah, it's a
no, exactly. And
lifesaver.
so this
They're
like
not that expensive either, are they? I think my instant pot, it's a smaller one, but it was like £70.
yeah, it's not too bad.
No,
And I
it's a
think
worthwhile investment.
yeah, you don't need to overcomplicate it. Like, so this idea of like convenient cooking as being like, not mutually exclusive from healthy cooking, I think is really important. But yeah, to go back to your question of soup, I do love like I'll do anything. I'll like throw in some like crushed tomatoes and then onion, carrots, and then that's a tomato soup. Maybe add some egg and chicken in it. There are just so many like, especially during like this chili season, I'm like such a soup person.
Yeah, it's so satisfying, isn't it? Yeah. And
Yeah.
do you use a lot of miso and soy sauce and tamari?
Yeah, I think something I love about Japanese cooking is like the flavors. Um, they're pretty simple, but they're really rich in umami, which is
Mm.
like I don't know the exact way to describe it, but it's like that savory taste that you
Savory, Moorish kind of,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, really good, the
Um,
thing kind of taste.
yeah, so I love because miso and soy sauce as well, they go through like this fermentation process, which increases the amount of umami in it. But yeah, I would like take like a salmon and then marinate in like some sake, miso, put that overnight, and then in the morning you just like pan fry it. And it's like so delicious. Have that with rice.
Oh, that sounds so nice. Yummy.
Yeah, but it's nice because Japanese cooking's maybe it's a little less like reliant on like heavy oils or heavy flavors. So the ingredient of what you're cooking with, the flavor of that comes out, which is something I appreciate about Japanese food. It's not like the sauce is overwhelming the flavor of a vegetable or a protein, but you can actually taste like, okay, like I don't know, the citrus notes of like this asparagus is coming out. And I feel like it helps me see vegetables not as this thing that tastes bad. I need to make it taste good, but how to enhance the natural flavor of like the foods I'm cooking with to enjoy it even more.
Yeah, yeah, that's really good advice. And do you find, I mean, obviously the Western diet is often quite salty, like lots of sort of fats are used, like heavily deeply fried and sunflower oils and stuff. Did you find the transition from those kind of foods to sort of they do feel like I don't really want to use the word cleaner because I don't think that's a really good word to use in nutrition, and it's not good for people to think, bad,
Right,
good,
right.
clean, dirty foods. But they just feel more simple. Maybe that's a better way to describe it. Those simple tastes. Did you find that transition sort of happened easily from the high salted, high
Um,
flavor to the sort of more, simple
your
taste?
taste buds will adjust. And so I think it's important to do it slowly. I think if you go from like, you know, like a very high fat, high salt diet to one that has none, you're going to be like, everything tastes so bland. But if you do it slowly, like maybe slowly reducing them out or maybe replacing some of the meals that may have like higher fat or salt, like, and then again, going back to moderation, just eating a little less of it. I think your taste buds adjust and it doesn't need to be like a painful process. I don't even think I try to do it. It was more of like a natural, like, oh, I want to like, see how I might like enhance this flavor of like broccoli without, just like using the ingredients I have at home. And naturally, I'm kind of like, oh, I actually don't need this much mayonnaise, or I don't need to like fry it like this. Not to say like you shouldn't ever have like fried foods or like fatty foods. It's just this idea of like, okay, how might like I enhance the flavor of what I'm eating rather than overwhelm it.
Yeah, that sounds good. And Kaki, what are some of your, I mean, do you do 3 meals a day or 2 meals a day? Do you fast at all?
Um, Not intentionally. I think my overarching philosophy is to eat when I'm hungry. So, depending on how much I've exercised, my kind of lifestyle at that point, like maybe, if I'm being really active, I'll eat 3 meals a day because I'm hungry. I my body's like, you need this fuel. Whereas, maybe I'm like sick or something and I'm recovering from something. It's like I'm just not as hungry and I might just have like 2 meals a day, maybe even just like one big meal. I think when we become really overly prescriptive with the way we eat, when we aren't able to like follow that protocol, we feel like this loss of control and that can like lead to stress. I think you're also, thinking about food all the time. And if you're like, let's say you're trying to fast, but you're super hungry and you're irritated and really stressed and you can't think of anything else, it's not like a very conducive way to improve your well-being. Whereas, if you eat when you're hungry, it's like, okay, I'm hungry, I eat, and then I can put that thought away. At the end of the day, you really want to do what's best for you and your lifestyle, and also accommodating that to where you are in life. Maybe you have, higher stress job, thinking about ways in which, if you don't have a lot of time, how do I eat? Whereas, maybe you have more time and you're exercising more and you, you just need to be eating more. You might think about like, okay, I need to eat 3 meals, but what do I want to eat? So, being mindful of like what you need in.
Yeah, that sounds kind of where it's at really, isn't it? I'm the same. Sometimes I do 2 meals a day if I'm having quite a sedentary day, and other times I really know that I need 3 meals and I need the breakfast as well. So
Right.
interestingly, what kind of what's a normal breakfast for you, Kaki? What kind of things do you like for breakfast?
Now that it's getting colder, I'm definitely more of a soup person. So I'll eat, if I have soup for dinner, I'll like take the leftovers and just heat it up in the morning. And I love starting my day with like fresh rice. So I'll have like a bowl of rice and then like a soup, which might have like some vegetables and protein in it. In the summer, I'm a bit more of like, I like a Western breakfast a bit more. So I might have some like blueberries with yogurt and some honey on it. I usually don't eat like a huge breakfast, but like just something to kind of like get over that morning hunger and take me to lunch.
Yeah, that sounds really balanced and really yummy. I did a podcast on why Japanese women don't suffer with menopause. It was episode 5, and it was one of my most listened to podcasts. Why do you think? I mean, I know you people can't see you now. Kaki's definitely not midlife, but she's very fresh faced. But why do you think this is? Having lived in Japan, why do you think Japanese women don't suffer with the menopause?
Menopause is probably a couple of reasons. I think one is when your body is like more well balanced, I would say. It's like you're getting regular exercise, you're eating well. I think the symptoms of menopause are a lot easier to manage. I think in terms of just also like attitudes towards aging, I think is very helpful. I find that the message around aging that I get over here a lot is like trying to anti-age or like stop aging, whereas there's a bit more of an attitude around like trying to embrace aging. So if your body is changing, not trying to like force it back to like what it was when it was younger, but trying to embrace and, understand like your new reality and how you might manage that, I think helps people manage their symptoms better because they're not pushing themselves to do things that they can't do or aren't conducive to like their well-being. Um, but yeah, I would say, just like a balance of like good physical health coupled with like an attitude towards being flexible and trying to learn new things about your body instead of pushing it towards what you want it or think it should be.
Yeah, that sounds like such a healthy approach. And I observe that Japanese women have beautiful skin, and I think skincare is plays quite a big
Yeah.
part, doesn't it, in how women, look after themselves. And they did look incredibly youthful, and it was quite hard to age men and women, actually. I think Japanese people just seem to age quite gracefully, and yeah, I don't know, don't seem to have as many wrinkles as perhaps we do here in the West. I don't know why that would be, but that was my overriding impression. And and I'm wondering, and it's making me wonder, I mean, here in the UK, a lot of people are turning to Botox and fillers as a way of sort of, anti-aging, if you like. Is that happening in Japan in the same way, do you think?
I think it definitely exists. I think Japanese women face a lot of pressure in like their appearances, as women in almost any society does. I do think though there's a bit more emphasis on like trying to look and be natural. So not necessarily like, I think a lot of the plastic surgeries in the US is about they're like unattainable beauty standards. And, I think you can argue some Japanese beauty standards are like not realistic, but I think there is a bit more emphasis on like feel and look natural. But yeah, beauty
I
standards in
like the
Japan.
sound of that. Yeah, it's you're feeling good and being natural. Sounds good to me. So do you have any advice for women here, that are going through midlife and, anything that we can borrow or imitate from our Japanese counterparts?
Yeah, I would say the big thing is really, well, maybe there are two things. I think the first one is like it's part of like nature. There's no need to like fear it. There's no need to, resist it in a way. I think if if you can kind of embrace and go into your body changing with a curious mindset, I think you'll come out of it a lot more confident in your own skin and also more appreciative towards your body, being able to treat it right. I think when people put, unattainable standards or stress on trying to maintain your youth, then you reach a point where your body becomes even more out of balance. I think being able to see aging as a natural and, you know, uh, yeah, like it's a positive part of life,
Yeah, it's a process. It's a cycle of life, isn't it? That's reminding me of one of your newsletters about acceptance and how we all need to accept the impermanence for inner peace.
you're referring to mono no aware, but it's this idea of, yeah, like it's it's kind of a melancholy feeling. It's not necessarily like super like exciting, but when it's like this awareness of like time passing, but feeling a lot of gratitude for that moment. And so I try to practice this, but also encourage it in others is, I think a lot of the times we spend our time like thinking about the future or like thinking about the past, but really this idea of like, okay, life is impermanent, things are constantly changing. And that means you need to like be appreciative, like, or you need to is maybe strong, but being appreciative of the present moment, I think is a really powerful way to make the most out of life and not constantly being like in this mindset of the future or the past. And so when we're able to, you know, it's like, oh, it's sad that things are changing. Like things won't always be this way, but I think that's also what makes these moments valuable. So being able to appreciate where you are and, you know that it's not forever and that might be kind of sad, but I think that also makes that moment a lot more precious.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've been thinking about that a lot lately, whether it's, to do with your kids and Christmases and, you suddenly look back and everybody's changed so much in 2 or 3 years
Right.
and you never get that back again. And even when something feels a bit boring, it's actually, you'll look back and wish you could just go back to that time for a moment. But how do you suggest that how do we, how can we live in the moment? It's kind of, it's a really lovely concept, but it's easier said than done. Have you got any
Yeah,
tips on how to do that?
I think a really helpful way, I think writing is a very tangible way for people to reflect on the moments that are really good or important to them. I think, if you can write down your values. So let's say family is a really important value to you, reflecting on moments in the day where you felt really connected to family, or um, moments that were really precious to you, and realizing like, oh, I might not always have a Christmas where like maybe my kids are here, or like this family member, and being able to like express gratitude for that. And also another way is like talking about it with other people, being like, oh wow, like, you know, like this memory, or like spending this time with you is like really fun. I like being able to just share and yeah, reflect on it together of like, oh, this is like really wonderful, like taking photos, capturing that. I think those can be like maybe more tangible ways of being able to appreciate and find gratitude for a moment.
Oh, that's just brilliant advice, Kaki, and something hopefully we can all sort of think about and incorporate in our life. So we're coming to the end of our session. It's gone really quickly, and I'm sure everyone's going to really enjoy listening to you. I just want to bring it down to something quite practical, and I'm curious to think what your opinion is on matcha tea before we finish up. We have this, I've been drinking quite a lot of matcha tea, and you know how, foreigners get hold of an idea from another country and we blow it up and we think it's wonderful. But yeah, from a, Japanese person, what do you think of matcha tea?
Well, I personally love it. I know not everyone loves it, but I think
Uh-huh.
something about, and maybe this is like tea drinking in general, but I think it slows people down. Like you can't really like, you know, like chug down a cup of tea. I think Japanese matcha is also traditionally enjoyed like unsweetened. And I think people are really encouraged to like, key in on those flavors. It's like it's bitter, but how bitter? It's like hot, but like how hot? And you're thinking about like the texture of it. So matcha tends to be like really creamy and thick compared to like, but you can also have it, as green tea, which is just like with water, and it's like your more normal texture. But I think that, yeah, that experience of like really keying in on like the flavors you're experiencing, the smells you're experiencing, and then slowing down and sitting with your drink. Those are parts of like tea drinking culture that I love.
Yeah, which is kind of like speaks of the whole culture, doesn't it? And it takes you ages to make a matcha tea because you have to whisk it. And I say ages, I mean it's like a few minutes, but that's how
Yeah.
society's become. Like taking a few minutes out to make yourself something really lovely seems like excessive. I tend to have mine with like really lovely oat milk or out of a bottle, or some cashew nut milk or something like that. And
Yeah.
yeah, so you still get those sort of bitter tastes, but it's a bit more palatable. Do you think that's still okay?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think it's
Still
really
getting all the
important to,
nutrients.
yeah, just enjoy
Mhm.
it. And, I'm doing anything just for the health benefits. I feel like you'll get very tired of it really quickly. So making sure you're enjoying what you're putting in your body, thinking about like, just having more of what you like, and make, healthy foods as well.
Yeah, totally agree. You've got to enjoy it as well, haven't you? And there are so many gorgeous foods out there that you can. And you've made everything from soup and rice and matcha tea all sound so delicious. So thank you, Kaki. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I've really so, enjoyed hearing about, your philosophy on Japanese culture and what we can do in our own lives to, use the best bits, if you like, and incorporate them into our own diet and lifestyles. And I'm sure a lot of the listeners would like to know more about you and sign up for your newsletter. So can you tell us how we can do that?
Yes, the newsletter is probably the best way to get my material. You can sign up at kakikata, kakikata.ck.page. I also have a book out. It's called Wow, the Art of Balance. I feel like
I
it's
didn't
a
know
really
that.
great,
Okay, great.
oh, it's a really great, like, it covers the foundations really clearly and in one book. I feel like if you want like a introduction, like a more holistic introduction, that's a great place
Can you
to
say the title again of that book, please,
Oh
Kaki?
yeah. What the Art of Balance.
And
Yeah.
I will leave a link for that book in the
Uh,
show notes. Don't worry. But yeah, and that's
um,
available on Amazon and
yeah, Amazon, a lot of different retailers. I think we're available in like a few different countries with international shipping. But yeah, to speak to the title, what is the Japanese word for harmony. So it's really talking about like how we can find harmony with, our lifestyles and then consequently our health and well-being. So yeah, if any of what we talked about today resonates with you, I think it'd be a good book to read.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Kaki. I'm definitely going to buy myself a copy of that book. And I hope we can, connect again one day. But yeah, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
No, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
If you'd like to find out more about my approach, you can find me and lots of my simple, nutritious recipes demonstrated on Instagram at Amanda Ryder Nutrition, and that's Ryder with a Y. Or you can visit my website, www.amandaryder.co.uk. Or if you'd like a copy of my book, Feel Good for Menopause, you can find that on Amazon. And of course, if you enjoyed this episode, I would really appreciate it if you could like, follow, or click the subscribe button. It will really help me grow the podcast and keep me going. So thank you. And of course, do get in touch. I'd always love to hear from you. So that leaves me to say I'm sending lots of love and light from my midlife goddess to yours. See you next week. Bye for now.